Okay, hello, welcome outperformers. It's good to see you again. We're here for another really exciting webinar. I have my good friend Mia Barry here, who I will introduce you to in a moment, to talk about this topic we're describing as finding your version of career success, which I think for many of us is an ongoing journey, and certainly something that I know through our organisation we're continuously involved in and touching that topic with people like yourselves. So I'm going to provide everyone a little bit of time to enter the webinar today. I appreciate there's people from all over the world that have registered, so hello to you in the UK if it's really late at night, and of course people around Asia and of course Sydney and the rest of Australia. So thanks for joining us. We love what we do. I'm really passionate about these sorts of webinars, and of course for anyone that has missed this live, you'll be able to see it all in the recording. For anyone that's new to the Outperformer, just for some context and to give you a little bit of time to settle into the session, we have three key parts of our business. This is a really important piece to what we offer, and do this as a bit of a free gesture of value to our community, people who are really passionate about in the accounting and finance space, and that is to bring in leaders like Mia and many of the others you'll see on our website, and you probably may have heard before if you've been involved with us, around issues around performance in the future of finance and driving your career. The two go hand in hand, and certainly I know for many of the people that listen to us regularly, there's a lot of value that comes out of listening to real stories, tapping into genuine journeys, and obviously the not just the high-level, fluffy kind of good news story that you might read in the paper about organisations and individuals, but of course the challenges it takes to overcome, to achieve, whatever that version of success is they're talking about, which is essentially what today's topic's about. The other parts of our business, for anyone that is new, is our one-to-one business. We work with individuals on their career strategy, coaching and shaping career decisions with people, and obviously introducing to mentors. If you can have a look at that, you're very welcome to. And we had a beautiful success the other day. We were nominated and awarded the winner of Education Program of the Year for Finance in Australia, which was awesome. And of course, that's the other piece of work we do for lots of organisations. So guys, a little bit of perspective. Hopefully everyone's started to settle into the room. It looks like we've got a majority of people that have registered here now, which is brilliant. Just a little bit of context on today's conversation before I introduce Mia. We've done a lot of research. We obviously are very close to you in the community and learn and listen to what the challenges are. We do that through surveys, research, and of course direct contact. And a few things that have come up quite consistently. We had one big piece of interesting research which came out with 30% of our community are not looking to, or if they had the chance, they wouldn't be an accountant. They would start again and consider a different career path. And often for people with that sort of mindset, it's not that they don't actually, or they can't drive value out of being an accountant, but they feel stuck and feel a little bit undervalued in the work that they're doing. And so the thought process is there that the career path isn't right. The other piece, and Mia will talk a little bit about this today, is 80%. Deloitte did a survey a little while back, but it still holds true for many organisations, that 80% of people are actually just unhappy in their work. There's a lot of frustration, pent-up anxiety. There's conversations that we're having with people quite consistently around this sort of barrier or disconnect between what their perceived goals are and of course what they're doing right now. And so to address not only to understand what that idea of success is quite important, but also the path and some strategies to help you break down that, particularly from the lens of a finance pathway and obviously from a finance leader like Mia. So enough from me. I've done my talking. Everyone's probably bored of me and you're not here to listen to me, but I'm going to introduce you to Mia. Mia is the CFO of The Iconic. She has a fantastic story, a high achiever in far more ways than just a career, in my opinion, and I'm sure you'll be blown away by some of the things she's done in her life. But of course, what comes with that is a lot of decision-making, reflection, and of course a good level of self-awareness on what it's taken to make those things happen. And I think that's the beauty of what you'll get from me today, is a sense of honesty, authenticity. I actually saw on LinkedIn today that one of her ex-colleagues described her as an authentic role model, and I think that's certainly something we'll get out of today's conversation. So, Mia, thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Brad, thanks for the great introduction. So hopefully I live up to those expectations.
Yeah, well, I'm setting a high benchmark.
Yeah, exactly.
But I certainly believe we'll see that. So, Mia, just for context, and obviously it's all, today's about this version of career success, but I think it's important for people to understand a little bit about your story. Would you be able to share, who you are, where you're from, where you came from, all that sort of stuff, and we'll start there.
Okay. Sounds good. So I actually started my career when I was 17, and I started in a bit more, at the time, probably a traditional way, where I did a traineeship and studied full-time at the same time as working full-time at KPMG. And for me, I was there for 6 years, and that was a really great, I guess, platform for me to grow from. I really learnt about sort of good leadership skills, had a lot of discipline, a lot of time management and prioritisation, because I was trying to balance the work and the uni side of things, which was really quite hard as a 17-year-old who also just wanted to go out and party.
Sets good discipline.
Exactly. And so, as I mentioned, I was at KPMG for 6 years, and then I got a bit of the travel bug and decided to move over to London with my partner at the time. And we said we're going for 12 months. 10 years later, I was still in London. And I think the time in London was really allowed me to hone a number of those skills that I learnt from KPMG around discipline and management, but it actually allowed me to operationalise it and commercialise that experience. I was contracting for a few years, did a variety of roles in a breadth of industries, and then actually went to work at the Train Line, which was a Virgin-controlled company at the time, for a period of 6 years. And while I was working there, I had 3 different roles. And there were 3 completely different roles, some vertical moves, some horizontal moves. And in many times I was actually being pushed beyond my limits. We grew the company from a £300 million company to a £1.3 billion company in 6 years.
So busy times.
So really busy time, really setting up teams, supporting that growth. And in many instances, I felt like I was a bit of an imposter, and you hear a lot of leaders talking about that. And the only way that I got through that was actually through leveraging my network, having really strong managers, mentors that actually believed in me throughout that period, and having curiosity to actually learn through those difficult times. After that 10 years in the UK, I moved back to Australia, had a role as a finance director when I first came back, and then went to Coca-Cola for 4 years.
Yes.
Originally in a group business planning role, which was a difficult role for me because I've been in very much operational roles previously, and that was the first time I've been in a group and corporate role. And I learnt a lot there again around how do I influence remotely. So how do I build up those relationships in order to influence, which was really important. After a couple of years there, I moved into the biggest division, the retail division, and I was the head of commercial for that division. And it was a life-changing role really for me to be like leading such a big division, and to be given that responsibility. And it was really that sort of experience that I'd gained from working overseas and abroad in sort of like commercial roles, in finance roles, that allowed me to actually obtain that role.
Yeah, great.
I wasn't looking for another role, and I got a phone call from a recruitment agent about a role at the Iconic. And I was very much interested in the Iconic, like who wouldn't be, like fashion, online, CFO role. And actually I had done a career plan, and we'll talk a little bit later maybe about career planning, but I had completed a career plan 12 months earlier. And part of my career planning is looking at aspirational roles. And at the top of that was the Iconic CFO. And here I was getting a phone call for this dream role. And I went through the process, 7 interviews, and was successful in getting that position. And I honestly believe that is the best CFO role in Australia. So I'm very pleased to be in a role where I can truly feel like I'm making a difference and love going to work every day.
Awesome. And so Just to add a little bit
Yep.
to that, you obviously love what you do, and we're going to talk. There are a few points there that you might have picked up in the story, some challenges, some interesting times, the imposter piece, lots of stuff going on. So we'll really dig into that with you today. But for additional context, just a little bit more about the Iconic. I know you love what you do there.
Yes.
Tell everyone a little bit more, particularly if they're not familiar with the business,
Okay.
and that role.
Yep, so the Iconic is the largest online retailer in Australia. We have 10 million visitors coming to our site on a daily basis. We sell fashion in menswear, women's apparel, sports, and we work both with other brands and provide the best, I guess, customer experience from a retailer in Australia. My role as CFO, we're a growing company, and very much business partnering and supporting the executive team and the business to achieve our growth aspirations, which are quite big growth aspirations. At the same time as setting a platform for us to be able to scale. And I think they're the key challenges. Is we're growing fast at like 40 to 50% year on year, and enabling both our teams and the organisation to grow to be that $1 billion company within a couple of years.
Yeah, and it's tracking well, right?
It is tracking well, and also I believe I work with the best executive team in the country as well, and the culture is amazing.
So there's no bias there.
There's no bias at all. I'm completely objective.
No, I must say, as a customer of the Iconic, I recently just bought something. We were talking about this before the session. Amazing customer experience in terms of turnaround, and particularly the nice little card I got when it all arrived. So very, very cool. Again, so we're just laying the platform with a bit of context, and I think everyone can already see that you've had a fantastic career. Outside of your career, you do lots of other interesting stuff as well.
Yeah.
So just so people understand who Mia is, tell us a bit more.
So as you alluded to in the beginning, I get a lot of stuff done. I've actually done a strengths assessment once, and it said that I was one of my key strengths as an achiever, and I think that's not only in work, that's actually in life. And one of my biggest challenges is how do I achieve in both work and life and achieve that success? And we'll talk about what success means to me later. But I'm really passionate about health, about nature, about learning. And from a sports perspective, I think you mentioned in your blurb about me, I've actually competed in 2 world championships in 2 different sports. So I've competed on the world stage for cycling for Australia, and also in half Ironman. I completed 8 Ironman, I think 10 or 12 half Ironman, 1 standalone marathon. So sports is very much a part of my life, and it's also always been a challenge to be able to fit that training in. In addition to that, I'm also studying a master's in functional medicine through a university in the US, which is a 4-year master's. And additionally, I love to learn, and I try to, I listen to Audible a lot, and I try to read sort of 2 business books on Audibly on a weekly basis to continue to sort of like drive that thirst for learning. So I'm very busy, but somehow I fit it all in.
And you love it.
And I love it.
Yeah. So don't worry, everyone on the call, you don't need to turn into a world champion Iron Woman or Iron Man, but I think it's just gives a bit of taste of what we're talking about here today with Mia, is that ability to reach your potential if you want it. So we're going to get into the heart of it, right? So I want to sort of get you to explore this awareness of, I guess, where career decisions became quite important to you, and life decisions, I suppose, they go hand in hand.
Yep.
And where you started to maybe either have a wake-up call or an event in your career that really started to get you focusing on what's important and what success means for you. Yeah.
I think, just to go back, I think I've always had an awareness that I've had to be able to achieve both life and personal success. Like, you know, going back to when I was 17 and I was trying to juggle work, uni, and my personal life, there's always been that sort of constant desire to actually achieve both from a personal perspective and achieve from a work perspective. Yeah. So that's been something.
It's inbred in you.
But I think there was a big bang moment for me. When I was working in London, I was working really, really long hours and working really, really hard, but also loving what I was doing. Yeah. So not really being aware of that. At the time, I was going through acquisitions, negotiating contracts. I was in my commercial director role there, so not a typical finance role. And I was training for 2 Ironmen in 1 year. And as you can imagine, that probably is long days and a lot of stress on both the body and the mind. And so something had to give. And unfortunately for me, that was my health. And I think if I look back on it, I go, I probably knew that beforehand. I knew something wasn't right, but I didn't listen to that voice in my head. And so I was too busy. Like I didn't have enough time to actually pay attention to that voice. And so, as I mentioned, something, you know, from a health perspective, I had a few, I had a few moments, and they were big. And so up until that point, my ultimate career objective was to be CFO. And I thought that there was only one path to actually achieve that, and that was through hard work and life sacrifice. And you know, that was that moment where I said, I can't do this anymore. Like my health and my life has to be a higher priority. And so I realised that I had to really re-find me and redefine myself, and that's probably where I actually took some time out. And I know not everyone can take the time out, but I took 6 months out, and I actually spent a lot of time talking to my friends, my mentors, and colleagues that I trusted, and talked to them about, you know, where I was in my life, things that were important to me, and that was where I probably really started to redefine for me what my version of success was. And since that point, it's not that I'm not focused, I don't have grit. It's just I focus on my version of success and things that are important to me in order to achieve. Not always looking upwards, not always looking for that next role, which is what I had been doing. Like I had been going, okay, I want to get to CFO, so I need to tick the box here, I need to tick the box there, and really listened to other people as to what I had to do next. And I wasn't in the driving seat.
And it happens. I'm sure there's people on this call now that, you know, whether it's advice from the sort of old ways of thinking about career or the recruitment space or whatever it might come from, that transactional sort of mindset of moving from manager to senior manager, or moving from, you know, I don't have this experience and therefore I need to make that my next move, and just pushing hard. When you were reflecting on it, and at the time, obviously, I'm keen to take you back into that world as much as possible, was that time to step away with the mentors, was that about reflecting on actually what is important, and what sort of conversations were you having?
It was about reflecting. So going back to your earlier comment, there was a question as to whether I wanted to be an accountant or whether I wanted to be in finance anymore, because I had been working really, really hard. And as I said, I still had a life, but it was like I was trying to put too much into too little. And so a lot of those conversations were about sort of trying to understand what made me happy, what made me fulfilled, what I was good at, what I enjoyed doing, and what things really resonated with me, not only in work, but also in life. And it was through those conversations that I guess I really found my definition of why. And I think we talked about previously that I've been reading the Simon Sinek book, Finding Your Why. And he talks a lot about how if you don't know your why, your reason for being, and what makes you tick, then you can actually be really happy in a role and feel happiness, but you'll never feel fulfilled. And I didn't realise that at the time, but that's what I was doing during that period. I was really trying to find my why. And
so you're getting external gratification from people saying you're doing a great job, you're really good at what you do, but you didn't feel the fulfillment piece.
Yeah, exactly. And so, you know, I was talking to friends and even just reflecting on, you know, what things that they liked about me, to try to sort of like work out what was my why, like what were my strengths.
It's an interesting time, isn't it?
It is, yeah.
We'll talk about that a little bit more, and I'm sure that the why piece is going to come up in the conversation. But, you know, the word success, and you've used it a few times, and I use it a lot. And in fact, my first website had this, you know, how do you find success on it around career. And I think it's slightly misleading because people already have a belief system about success and have a thought process about it. In fact, it's really interesting when we do a lot of coaching, we'll say, you know, what is it important to you? And people say, you know, I want to be successful, but they don't really define what that is. It's really difficult for them to articulate. So in your opinion, you know, how do you bring that all together? What is success? What, you know, particularly after that reflection, what's it mean to you?
Yep. Well, so just in preparation for this, I actually looked up what does success mean in the Oxford English Dictionary.
Very cool. I didn't know that. That's good.
And I didn't, because I'm like, okay, well, what does success mean? And what success is, I'm just going to read it here. Success is the accomplishment of an aim or a purpose. So underlying that is actually already, like, you have to know your aim or your purpose. And that's your why.
Exactly.
And so for me, and my why is, you know, is constantly being tweaked, but there is a few key sort of aspects to that, and that's to be the best of me, to bring out the best in others, and to help others bring out the best in themselves, to embrace learning, to feel challenged, and to drive action.
Yep.
And so for me, that is my why, to be able to make that difference to people and organisations, and to bring out that best in people. And it has changed over the years, and this happened like almost 10 years ago, but it's fundamentally stayed similar themes.
Yeah. So when you work that out, and I'm not sure when particularly you would have been able to define it with that sort of clarity, but of course you started to become more self-aware, and one of the things that I think, you know, you showed through some of those conversations around your career is you didn't have a linear path. You you were an FD at Gate Gourmet 1 minute, and the next minute you go into group finance at Coca-Cola, and that's in theory, on paper, that looks like a demotion in some respects. Of course, you know, we probably know better, but I'm really keen to sort of see how that plays out and what happened in reality when you started to apply that.
Yeah, and I think that's the interesting thing about my career. I haven't followed, like, in the beginning I was probably following a lot of the traditional finance moves, but since that time I've actually taken a bit of a different path, and ultimately I've ended up at CFO, but I've ended up there in a different way.
Yeah.
And so some of those horizontal moves have been difficult, and as you say, they could be demotions. Even when I was in that position at Coca-Cola in the group business planning role, I had a number of conversations. So I went into this role, felt completely like a fish out of water. I was in a group role where previously I'd always been in operational roles. I was in a company that I hadn't previously worked for, and I was in a role that I'd never done before. So
and you still got the job.
I still got the job. I don't know how I got the job. But so I'm in this role and I have no idea what I need to do. And I was reporting at the time to the group CFO, and which was one of the reasons why I actually took that role, because, you know, the group business planning role at Coca-Cola was not something I saw in my roadmap at all. So I'm in this role, and I just wasn't getting the directional support that I needed from my manager. And so I had a number of really tough conversations, and I think a number of these pivot moments really lead to really difficult conversations.
Absolutely, yeah.
And I had that conversation with the CFO, and I said, look, I don't think that I should be reporting to anymore. Can I report to someone else? And it was a two-way conversation. We both got to that same sort of position, and like that would have been seen as a demotion for sure. Reporting from the group to the group CFO to then reporting to someone that was reporting to her, like that's a demotion. But it was the best decision I could have made and could have arrived at, and that was through my probing. So, and I remember she said to me at the time, you know, that some people would perceive this as being really dumb, but I see it as being really brave. And I've had a number of those really brave conversations throughout my career, even when I took those horizontal moves at the train line as well, because I think it's important to be in the driving seat of your career and not to just follow that typical path. And ultimately, by having that conversation, that's then set me up for success to get the iconic role in the future. Yeah,
interesting. Just a side note, and this is a really important piece, I think, in this, and it adds to the flavour of the conversation. You were obviously offered a role that was outside of your comfort zone with a great leader that obviously you created a good relationship with as well. And I'm curious to think back on that experience. Why do you think you were offered that role?
So I think it goes back to a number of things. I have a high level of curiosity and that thirst for learning. And I think that actually comes across when people talk to me. I have that desire to add value, and I can navigate through complexity to find solutions. I think that they trusted in me as a person, and that's the way I interview as well.
Yeah.
I don't interview based upon experience. I interview based upon the person and what attributes can they actually bring to the role. And I've built my teams on that same basis. So I think they backed me as an individual, as opposed to backing me as a brand, as experience. As experience. So, and you see that as you become more senior in roles as well, that actually people are backing you as opposed to backing your experience.
Or your resume or whatever it might be.
Yeah.
Look, guys, on the there's going to be a few questions. I've already seen a few come through, and I'm definitely happy to field those. If you do have any questions that come through, that come to your mind, and you'd like me to respond on them, please definitely put them on. There's a little button at the bottom if you don't know where that is. It just says questions. There's a little box that will come up. Fire them away. I'll field them as we go. Just as a bit of a build on to that piece there, and again, this is a side comment that we probably haven't focused on a lot, but do you think there's a risk in business right now that where some of this old school career management around, I want someone with this particular career path and therefore they will be successful in hiring, is also a risk on people being hired for the right reasons, for the development, and obviously in this case with Nessa who hired you, do you think that if we don't address that it makes it difficult for people to actually authentically move into the right organisations? Yeah,
I think that hiring based upon experience is flawed. And I think it's flawed both for the employing company and also for the candidate. Ultimately, what I have seen is that success in a company is based upon the person's alignment to values and to culture, and also understanding that their version of success.
Yes.
Because that alignment for the right people will lead to success ultimately.
Yes.
And so by purely looking at experience, you're missing a heap of the individual. Yeah,
exactly. There's so much of the heart and the thinking and the, as you say, all these behaviours that are driven by motivation and belief systems that are unable to be tapped into on a CV, and I think that's what we miss a lot out in the general transactional recruitment place.
Yeah, and I think in a number of recruitment companies actually recruit based upon experience as well. And I know when I've moved sort of countries, I've always struggled with that because they put me in a box. And I'm lucky in the fact that I've got breadth of experience across multiple industries, but many people have more than their industry or their experience to offer to a role. And I think so there's a flaw in there from a recruitment perspective, but that flaw ultimately leads to that incorrect decision, both for the company and the individual.
Absolutely. It's really interesting because there's a good question from Damien that flows on from that, and obviously he's highlighted that culture is so important. How do you describe the culture at Iconic? And I think my little add-on to that is, how do you feel aligned to that, and does that help you feel successful in your role?
Yeah. So culture at the Iconic is one of the reasons why I actually joined the Iconic, apart from the fact that it was actually at the top of my list of aspirational companies. But at the time, I received a phone call for the Iconic. I received a couple of other phone calls for blue chip companies. And I went through the recruitment process for all of them, and had 2, maybe 3 job offers on the table at the time. And the reason why I chose the Iconic, albeit maybe not as financially a profitable decision.
Yes.
I felt that it was actually the right decision for me because of the values, because of the fact that their values are aligned to mine, which are, let me just make sure I get this right. We
work together.
No, we are stronger together.
Stronger together, that's right.
We dream big. We get stuff done. And the final one is we are true to our customers.
And you didn't even need to look for it.
Yeah, no, I couldn't even find it on my sheets of paper. So to me, that's a really great culture fit, and I felt like I've been able to really thrive in that environment. I felt like had the opportunity to make a difference and to really influence. And when you look back at my definition that I mentioned before around my definition of success and the why, that's really...
They play out really similarly.
Yeah, exactly. Like we dream big, we get things done. Like everything is aligned, and that was really important part of the interview process. And as I mentioned before, I met 7 people from the organisation before I actually joined, and I really tested on that. And I think that that's something that's really important, sometimes missed by candidates when they actually that they're looking for roles, that they don't test for that alignment to their culture and values. They go for an interview, and it's almost like the company is testing them to make sure that they're the good fit, but it's actually up to the individual to also test to make sure there's that alignment and they can be successful in that company, and really ask those questions around culture, value, and really dive deep into that.
It's interesting, you know, and I forgive you for not knowing all the values off the top of your head, because what I'd prefer to see from an organisation is people that live the values. And I think there's a lot of organisations with values written on the wall that aren't lived.
Yes.
And, you know, from an engagement or decision-making point of view, the ability to ask questions in an interview that show you that leaders and managers are actually living those values is important. That their decision-making process, that how they would carry out certain activities or the way they manage or whatever it might be, that you can start to hone in and question and challenge that during an interview process to get really under the hood with them. And it's about what have they done, and the same scenario questions that you probably are asked 1 million times in an interview probably should come back in a slightly different way, but obviously give you that insight on the way they behave. Yeah,
I can 100% say that actually those values are lived every single day. It's a lifeblood of the Iconic. Like we stay true to those values, and it's one of the things that makes it such a dynamic and amazing company to work for. Yeah, awesome. There's a couple of more questions that I'll field for you, but one of the questions that we were going to look at today was this mindset around either driving your career purely based on, I guess, either your boss's expectations, or even, you know, again, going back to that piece we talked about before around the title, right, and not a more broad understanding of what's important to you. What do you think, I mean, of course, we've talked about some of the benefits of you know, being aligned to your values, but what do you think some of the risks are with just being, you know, only aligned to some of those superficial pieces? Yeah, so I think we talked a little bit about vertical and horizontal moves as part of our conversation, and I think that's a really important aspect that we've touched upon. I think vertical moves and that climbing the corporate ladder is something that's perhaps a little bit outdated, and it's very short-term focused, and it sometimes doesn't mean that you have that alignment to your why. I think building that breadth and following, I guess, your passions, which you can't always do. Yeah. But and following that your development as well, making sure that not only through doing moves you're learning, but through actually being in a role you're developing within role is really, really important. And touching on that point of following your boss's needs, you always need to challenge that, and you need to constantly take the time to challenge how the alignment to the strategic objectives are aligned to your objectives as well. Yeah, so there's really alignment there. The question that's come through now is just, you know, how does one who hasn't worked at the Big Four or big corporates still make their way to the top? I guess we're sort of breaking that down, the idea of, well, what is the top would be my question, but what are your thoughts on that question? I think that comes back to, I guess, what we just talked about just before around experience versus a person. Yes. So even when I was at, say, Coca-Cola, not everyone had come from, like many people, most people I would say, didn't come from a Big Four background. And it's around sort of the person's curiosity, that ability to add value and to business partner with the organisation, that you actually show that value to the organisation. So it doesn't have to be the technical experience. Technical experience is fine.
Yeah, it's
but
a hygiene factor, really.
It's a hygiene factor, yeah. Like it's almost like, you know, your experience is what maybe gets you into a role, but it's then what's your brand and how do you show that value to the organisation?
And in terms of value, what's your definition of value?
It's value to an organisation. I think from a finance perspective.
Yeah.
So we've actually at the Iconic just gone through our exercise of really trying to define what our purpose is and what our mission is and how we drive that value. And we've really introduced the whole idea of business partnering, which is something that wasn't previously there at the Iconic. It was, you know, there was a lot of commercial thinking and a lot of financial reporting, but we didn't really have that business partnering with stakeholders. So I think at the end of the day, as business partners, you need to firstly have those hygienes of transactional and operational excellence, but then you need to switch from that performance reporting, because that's performance reporting, into sort of like the performance management and really supporting the business to be able to make critical business decisions to drive the company strategy and direction. As I mentioned, from a purpose perspective, the reason why we come to work during the day is to deliver business impact through credible decision support, transactional excellence and governance. So we've really defined that's the purpose of the Iconic, which I think is very important for finance people to understand how they drive that value.
Absolutely. And I think just to add on to Nija's question before, you know, one of the things that organisations in our research are very much focused on is this concept and the word that Mia used was impact. You know, are you making an impact or are you a passenger? And I think that's the question you've got to start to look at if it is the top. And I guess you've got to define what the top looks like for yourself. But ultimately, you know, if it is about your journey, people will latch onto you and support you, and you actually attract a lot of career support, and I no doubt you have throughout your own career, Mia, simply by looking at where that value intersection is. And that can be on the critical decision-making points. It could be on enabling the finance department to achieve better outcomes for the business, whatever that looks like. But that's really important. Listen, there's quite a few emails, so I'll certainly try and field them. Aubrey, my good friend Aubrey, has asked the question, good finance professionals are capable of being great CEOs, a much broader role, of course, than the CFO. Are you aspiring personally to be a CEO at some point?
I think it's a very difficult... I would say that for me, at the moment, I'm really enjoying my role as CFO and enjoying my role as CFO at the Iconic. I think as a CFO, you're in a unique position to be able to look across the whole organisation, and as an executive, you get to see that business breadth. And that's why, in a number of instances, CFOs then move into either a COO or a CEO type position. As I mentioned before, for me, it's not about that ladder and that climbing. It's about making sure that whatever role I take next, it's actually going to give me my version of success. So if there is a CEO role that actually allows me to bring out the best in me, bring out the best in others, continue to learn and to make a difference, then sure, I would never say no to an opportunity.
Absolutely. I think it's nice that you can reflect on that, because some people would not instantly say, yeah, I could be a CEO, but I think you're right. It is about the environment where you thrive and you get the most out of it, right?
And the organisation and what I'm driving as well. Like I've mentioned before, I'm passionate about so many things, the environment and nature and health and well-being, and you know, if there's alignment there and I feel I can make a difference as a CEO, for sure.
Absolutely. Awesome. I'm going to move back just to a few of our questions that we were thinking would be really valuable for the audience. And you know, you've mentored and coached quite a number of staff, people outside of your work and all that sort of stuff over the years. And I'm keen for you to share, and this is essentially almost like a theoretical mentoring session now, but if you considered you know, someone that sits to work with you and wants to work out their why and also work out sort of the decisions they make in your career, where do you start to help them, and where do you shape the conversation?
Yeah. So I think it starts from firstly defining your version of success.
Yes.
I think you need to understand that, and you need to be a self-expert. You need to understand yourself, because as a mentor, as a coach, I can't do that.
Yes.
I'm a facilitator to that discussion, and I can ask probing questions, but I can't give those answers. And I think, part of doing that is about understanding, like, what are your unique strengths? Like, what do you wake up loving to do? What inspires you? What are your values? And what are your experience? What are you good at? What are you not so good at? What do you like? What do you hate doing? What are you horrible at? So I think in understanding that, you'll start to formulate your why and your version of success.
Yes.
So I think that underpins many things. But then I pretty much use two tools. Those two tools, one's more of a longer term tool and the other one's more short term. And if I think about the longer term one first, which is the career plan, and I think it's really important to understand that before you start to do the second tool, which is the development plan.
Yes.
And so the career plan really lays out sort of, firstly, your brand and your why. So I think the brand and why are pretty much interchangeable.
And so when you say brand, that's how you want to be known?
Yeah, exactly. How you want to be known, and how you want to be known has to be aligned back to sort of like that version of success, and because otherwise that's not authentic.
Yes, absolutely.
It's got to be authentic because otherwise you're going to be striving for the wrong thing.
Yeah, and you're inventing someone that you're not, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Of course.
And so I start with that, and then I go through some of the steps that I got to in order to actually come to my why, and I look at sort of what are my strengths. So I write those down. I write down what I like doing. I then start to go, well, what are some of those aspirational roles that I would like to achieve based upon understanding my strengths and what I like doing, and do a gap analysis.
Yeah, okay.
And that gap analysis, and this may also incorporate many life things as well. It's not only a career plan, it's a life and career plan. I start to really understand that gap analysis and work out how I might go about achieving that. Look at my key networks and my key supporters.
Yes.
Because that they will, they're also important to sort of like bounce your career plan off, because they may go, what about this? What about that? And it's sort of like through talking to people, you really refine, in many instances, your version of success and your career plan. So
absolutely. Yeah.
To me, it's understanding that career plan and having those few bullets on what your next role might look like.
Yeah, it's interesting because a lot of people, when they work through a career plan, whether they do it formally or informally, that external perspective is really useful because you're so used to looking and doing and focused on your job in front of you that you don't actually do that regularly. You don't step away, and the ability for you to get someone else's perspective that sees you in operation and says, you're really good at this, and you seem to light up and you seem to get energized when you do that sort of work. And I also see that maybe it's a little bit the opposite in some other instances. It helps shape that sort of conversation, and the gap analysis piece falls out of that pretty naturally, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. And I think also getting that external perspective, sometimes you don't see stuff.
Yeah.
And that's a really important, I think, add to that. I think the career plan is really important to actually start with, because it gives you that longer term 3 to 5 year sort of time frame. And then once you've actually got that career plan and that aspiration, then going a bit more into a shorter term plan, which is a development plan, which I see as being sort of like 12 to 18 months.
Yeah, it's a little bit more tactical.
More tactical, much more. So yeah, your career plan's more strategic. It's the same as if you were doing a business plan.
Exactly.
You've got your budget, which is your development plan, and then you have your mid-term plan or your longer-term strategic plan, and so that's your career plan. And in that, it's much more around, okay, so what's my 12 to 18 month plan, where are my key gaps from a competency and an experience perspective, and what's my action plan to achieve those? And I think that development plan is something that is probably really important to either talk to your mentors about, or make sure you're having that one-to-one with your direct manager. Yeah,
it's awesome. Just went on the one of the questions that's come through from Miller was around, she appreciated a lot of sharing your experiences, but talked about, or asked the question about your biggest challenge in your career. If you think about, some of the hurdles or things that, in terms of getting to, this environment, this space of, I guess you're in a place where you're really happy now, and you probably have been for a while, but what have been some of the biggest challenges that have been defining in your success?
Yeah. I think one of the biggest challenges is actually the challenge. It's not easy to to question and not follow that vertical career path. I think there's been a number of really difficult conversations that I've had to have, particularly over the last 10 years, but even before that, sort of where I've seen my career going in a direction that it wasn't aligned to where I thought it would be going, or I felt like it was the wrong thing, either for me or for the organisation. Having those conversations with my leaders to try to drive the change that I wanted to see, they're difficult. Like, they're super difficult. There's been many times, and usually I write it down, my communication to be more male orientated. So I always lead and ask questions from that place of curiosity. And I use my authentic voice, and people recognise that, and they appreciate that. Whereas I've seen in many instances, females almost having to take on a bit more, and I've been lucky by the fact that I've actually been surrounded by people that have really supported me, both males and females, and bought into me. So I think staying true to yourself is really important to establish yourself as a female leader. I remember one time, and I don't see gender personally. Like, personally, I do not see gender. I see a person. And I remember there was one situation when I was at Coke, and I was in a meeting, and the next minute the sales director walks in and he says, "Mia, we're lucky you're in here because there's 19 men in here and you're the only female." And I had not even...
You never thought of it that way?
I'd never thought of it that way. And I always felt like I had a place in that room, and I had a perspective to bring, and it's how do you actually bring out that perspective in your way.
It's amazing. I mean, obviously there's a challenge. There's a lot of perspectives that come into play in this topic and arena. There's no right or wrong answer. There was a really good conversation we had a little while back with one of the other CFOs around diversity and those sorts of issues. And I think at the end of the day, the sort of people you surround yourself by will be important in whether you actually are successful, regardless of gender or diversity or whatever it comes down to, is ensuring that you're working with people that embrace you for who you are. And it comes back to everything that Mia's talked about today around alignment, around values and purpose, and of course, being around people that allow you to achieve that purpose in your role. And without that, it can make it difficult. Of course, we realise that there's people that upset the apple cart consistently in that space, but one measure that you can control, and of course that's what we sort of try and focus on when it comes to career management, is what are the inputs, what can you do, is exactly what Mia's talked about today. Mia, final comments. You've shared a heap of gold today. I think lots of people will be writing down notes and also just reflecting on your journey and enjoying the conversation. But any other comments or tips or thoughts that you would leave people with around reaching what they might consider their own version of success?
I think ultimately your career is down to you, and you need to be in the driver's seat. And as a result of that, you need to define what it is that you're striving for. Don't just follow someone else's idea of success, because ultimately that will lead to that 80% of people that are unhappy in their roles. So everyone's always busy and too busy to focus on these things, but you need to take the time, because if you don't take that time, then you won't ultimately achieve that success that you're looking for. Absolutely.
So really privileged to have everyone on the call who hasn't been too busy or haven't been too busy to invest some time in themselves. That's what we're all about here at the Outperform, and this is why we do the webinars, to give you a little bit of space to listen, to reflect, to take some ideas for yourself, and have the privilege of having someone like Mia here today to share some ideas, who not only has a fantastic story, but really shared some authentic, vulnerable and open conversations with us today that you don't really get in other forums. So Mia, thank you. Really appreciate it. Thanks. We've enjoyed it today. I've enjoyed it. For everyone on the call, we're doing a little survey at the end. If you do want any other support from us or want to have a conversation with us, drop a note on that survey. Any additional feedback, any other topics you want us to explore, anything else that you think is really important that would drive your career or help you drive your career, let us know. But we will all see you in a few weeks. We've got Pete Smith, who works with me, talking about some business partnership topics, and particularly on two really important topics. One will be on design thinking, which not a lot of people in finance understand, but you'll see is a very, very valuable tool around business partnership. and of course stakeholder journey mapping, and again an area that is a little bit new for many people, but something that is absolutely important if you are looking at creating value for your stakeholders. So thanks again, guys. Please fill in the survey. We'll see you all next time. Thanks, Mia. Love your work today, and we'll catch you soon. All the best.